Morning, everyone. Thank you. My name is Gill. I'm Salt Lake County District Attorney. Today we are gathered to do a walkthrough of Sandy Police Officer Brian Peters' use of deadly force at 9151 South Monroe Plaza in Sandy on November 9 of 2023 against a 16-year-old male who we refer to as MP. The following facts were, before I do that, let me just put one context because I think it's important for this. On that day in question, early in the morning, police found out that MP crashed and abandoned a stolen truck. Shortly after, a government van was stolen. When police tried to stop it, the van took off and the police did not pursue at that time. That happened in the morning. Later in the morning, a caller reported a suspicious van with government plates and a teenage driver asking for gas. And it was that second citizen who then contacted the police, and police found the vehicle and started following it. So it's important to give that context. The van that was involved ran multiple red lights. Police tried to spike it, and they lost sight of it. An officer saw the van and tried to stop it. At that moment, the van flipped a U, went the wrong way in traffic, and hit a motorcyclist. Incidentally, the motorcyclist, who was severely injured, subsequently lost his leg as a result of that accident. Shortly after that happened, immediately shortly after that, the shooting officer got to the street where the van had last been seen. The van emerged from the end of the street, heading back in the direction of the officer. As the van got closer, it veered towards him, and he fired his service weapon. So it's important to give you that context before I take you through the facts of it, because what is a little bit confusing about it is that this actually started earlier in the day, and it was the ongoing abandonment of a vehicle, stealing a vehicle, the subsequent chases that ultimately led to where we are. So I think it was important. So let me tell you what we discovered from this investigation. On November 9, 2023, at 11:38 a.m., a 911 caller reported that she had noticed a suspicious Chrysler Voyager minivan with U.S. government plates and a driver that appeared to be 16 to 17 years old driving through her neighborhood in Sandy, that he had stopped and asked for gas. At 11:45, Sandy PD officers Hartvigsson and Bird were dispatched and advised that it was possibly related to a stolen vehicle case that Officer Hartvigsson had responded to earlier in the morning. That was the context that I was trying to give you. On that earlier call at 7:31 a.m., SPD officers had been dispatched to a 911 call in which the caller reported that his government vehicle, a gray 2021 Chrysler Voyager van, had been stolen from an Army recruitment center in Sandy, and that he was following him. That is the suspect. The 911 caller continued to follow the van until SPD located it, and at about 7:53 a.m., South Jordan Police Department attempted to effectuate a traffic stop in on the van, but it fled, and the officers did not pursue at that time. Officer Hartvigsson requested additional units to help check the area, and Officer Gates and Thomas were also dispatched. About 12:16 p.m., later in the afternoon, Officer Gates located the stolen van, and he and Officer Hartvigsson began following it as additional officers, including Officers Peters, responded and attempted to get ahead with spikes. At 12:20 p.m., Officers Hartvigsson advised that the van had failed to yield and turned westbound on 9400 South from 700 East, and that Officer Gate was still behind it. At 12:21 p.m., Officer Thomas attempted to deploy spikes at 410 East, and he then advised that he missed the spikes and the van had gone through a red light at 300 East. At 12:22 p.m., Officer Gates advised that the van had continued straight on 9400 South State Street, but he had hit the red light. After losing sight of the van, the officers continued to the area in effort to cut the van off, and at 12:23 p.m., Officer Bird advised that he was on 90th South and Monroe Street getting out of his car with spikes. Officer Byrd then advised that he had him, that is the suspect, at the light on 90th and Monroe, and was challenging him at that time. The stolen van was in a northbound left turn lane on Monroe Street. Officer Peters and Pojoy then activated their lights and sirens and headed to the area. As Officer Byrd approached the van on foot and yelled commands, the van backed up, made a U-turn, and began traveling back south in the wrong direction of traffic. Officer Byrd advised over the radio he is on a wrong way on Monroe, back south. The van then hit a northbound motorcyclist and continued southbound on Monroe Street. At 12:24 p.m., Officer Byrd advised over the radio of the accident that he is straight on Monroe back towards the classic skating. Officer Peters arrived in the area with lights and sirens activated and continues south past the wrecked motorcyclist and onto Monroe Plaza Way. Officer Peters advised that he was in the area and didn't see him, and then asked a bystander where he was at. As the bystander pointed him down the road, the van emerged from the right side of the end of the street and began heading back northbound towards them at a high rate of speed. Officer Peters quickly pulled his vehicle forward and got out with his handgun drawn. As the van approached, Officer Peters began yelling, "Get on the ground," and the van veered in his direction. Officer Peters fired at the van as it drove towards him and then continued past him. Officer Peters then advised, "Shots fired." Officer Pojoy, who had stopped his vehicle behind Officer Peters, later told investigators that he saw the van coming back in his direction. He was going to step out of the vehicle, but being that the van was going in my direction, thinking it was going to hit directly towards me, I closed my door and remained inside. Officer Pojoy explained that the van started just accelerating back out as like if it was trying to find an exit in my direction, and that it was more in the middle of the road. Officer Pojoy further explained, as the van is coming, looking for the exit, going northbound on the road in my direction, I start to get out of the vehicle, but as I try to get out of that vehicle, I see this vehicle approaching my way. I decide, oh, this car's gonna hit me. I stay in my car and I hear the gunshots in front of me. Officer Pojoy further explained that as he saw the vehicle coming in their direction, he closed the door and leaned to his right to brace for the impact, but then heard the gunshot. And he would also, in his interview, indicate that he also was cognizant that Officer Peters was ahead of him, also in the way of the van as the van was coming. So his testimony becomes very relevant to us in terms of what he's experienced as we try to figure out what Officer Peters is experiencing. After the shots were fired, the van slowed down as it continued forward. Officer Peters and Pojoy approached with their firearms and yelled commands, and Sergeant Colton in a Ford F-150 truck arrived and blocked the vehicle's path. Officer Peters then opened the driver door, and a male, who was later identified as 16-year-old MP, stepped out as he raised his hands. Officers took MP into custody and began rendering medical aid. MP was transported to a hospital by emergency medical responders. However, he did not survive his injuries. Notably, as captured by his dash camera recording, Officer Peters began firing his weapon approximately 8 seconds from when the van is first seen emerging back onto Monroe Plaza Way from 9120 South. So that's a lot of information. So I'm going to take you and try to give you some context of exactly what happened. Officer Peters refused to give us a statement, as is his constitutional right, so we relied a lot on Officer Pojoy, who was right behind him at that time, as well as some of the other officers. Go ahead and, so before I start, it's important to sort of contextualize this for you. So this is the end of Monroe Street right here. What Officer Byrd is talking about is that as he's coming here, he's parked over here, and he gets out of his car to confront the van and is going to try to attempt to spike it. He stops at that point, so he goes on guns to challenge him, and the van is going to flip a U and go on a wrong way back down this way. And as he's doing so, he will hit that motorcyclist right there. And then he continues down here, and I think he'd realized he didn't have an end, so he will come down, and you will see, turn around, and he will start to come back at this way. In the meantime, Officer Peters has come down. He's been directed by people who are here that the van is, that this person had gone down here. He will get here, exit out of his vehicle, as well as Officer Poja, who will come and who will park behind them. And that sort of gives you a context of how this happens. The other thing to keep in mind, as that vehicle has turned around and hit that motorcyclist, Officer Peters is coming down here and he sees that debris from that motorcyclist who is there and has been hit. The other thing, when we play the video, you'll notice that around this corner, it just happened that there was a fire engine that was coming, and they turn on their lights, not because they were being called to it, they just happened to be in the space when this incident had happened with the accident with the motorcyclist, and they rushed to render aid to the victim of that crash. So so at this time, so the first thing that I'm going to show you is a video, it's a dash cam from Officer Pojoy. And the reason why that's important, as I indicated, Officer Peters declined to give us a statement, but Officer Pojoy will actually come and park behind Officer Peters, and that captures the essence of the larger scene before we go down to the other body cams. And the thing to note is that we're starting at this because, like I said, it still shows the stolen van driving towards Officer Peters when he steps out of his vehicle, right when he starts to fire. So it actually captures him firing that weapon from a very different perspective. So go ahead and play that, please. So this is that intersection. This is Bird's car that had stopped. And this is the one way that he will go back. This is Bird running. The accident has happened here. The victim is lying there. And there's a Good Samaritan who stopped to start to help the victim. And this fire truck just happened to be in the area. This is the road. They're going to be directed by these folks. This is Officer Peters. And this is... And this was really important to us because it actually gave us a view from a very different perspective. And the reason it becomes important is that it helps us appreciate where Officer Peters is, what his body language is in response to that, but also the clearest view, you can see the van actually swerve towards Officer Peters when he starts to fire. And that is an important element for us to consider. So the next video that we had, let me just go, is Officer Pojo but is slowed down a little bit, so go ahead and play that again. So here's the van. Officer Peters is getting out, and just sort of watch, again, the wheels, and when he starts to look at it, and you can see the wheels turning towards him, and you can see his body reacting. He's pinned. And that's when he fires at that moment. At that moment, there is not space, but he's reacting to that turn of the wheels towards him as he does so. And this gives us that perspective. And this also helps us understand why Pojoy is saying he braces himself because he's afraid that he's actually going to get hit as well. And so play that one more time if you can, please. Again, as he's getting out of the vehicle, and again, it just allowed us to see that movement and what he's reacting to, but also how his body is reacting. So you see the wheel starting to turn towards him. And that's when he fires, at that moment. And then the vehicle will go this way from there. And so that became an important part for our consideration. So now we have the shooting officer, Officer Peters. Then this allowed us to now, once we had that context, then we could go to his dash cam and play that. So go ahead and play that now from Officer Peters' perspective. Again, stopped. What he's aware of is that on the radio they've already said that he's run down one way, that there's been an accident involving the motorcyclist. There's Officer Bird, who is now running. Here is the accident that he's viewing right there. This is the victim, the Good Samaritan. He comes in and he's being directed. So he parks and he sees. And you can again see that the dash cam shows us, and even that we can see that veering in the direction of Officer Peters at that time. And so that starts to give us a more thorough context on that. The next one is a wide shot of Officer Peters' dash cam. So go ahead. So we were able to widen that. Again, to just give her more peripheral vision. Bird running, accident, Samaritan getting out. Here's the fire truck that just happened to be there. People who were there in a very close space. Direction.
Where you at? Yeah, where you at?
Here's the suspect getting out. He's getting out of the way. And again, watch. So that actually allowed us to see from the other one, again, a picture of Officer Peters. So then we just, from that, we moved right to his body-worn camera. So this is now, there's a dash cam, there's POJOs, and then of course this is what the body cam from Officer Peters, who was the shooting officer. Go ahead. And you can see it helps us.
Shots fired! Shots fired! Stop! Stop! Stop moving! Stop moving! Stop! Put your hands up! Put your hands up! Put your hands up! Put your hands up! Put your hands on the fucking ground! On the ground!
And this was, again, very instructive to us because it gives us his perspective in that compressed space as that van comes. And without having that external one, it would be harder. It's harder from here to appreciate that unless we have that wider angles and other videos that show us that. But it is important in terms of how compressed he was in that space as well. So based on that, is our finding that the use of force was reasonable, and therefore we would decline to file any charges against Officer Peters. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
This one seems like a tough one, just because it's, if not for the veer, would you have found it unjustified? Because you've always said that you can't shoot a moving vehicle because the vehicle's not going to stop, which obviously
Right.
it didn't. And it almost looks like the officer put himself in the path of the moving vehicle.
Right.
There's no way the kid get on the ground as soon as he steps
No,
in his
no.
car.
No, I think the auditory commands are irrelevant, right? I think what is interesting about this, and it is, right? I think that's why we talk about every case by case, right? My general prohibition is if a vehicle is moving away from you and you're putting yourself in that way, yes, I understand that. But what is important about this, when we looked at it, it happened in a very compressed way. there is an accident that just happened, and he's going and he's being directed. And as soon as he gets there, he's trying to get out and he's reacting. And this is a vehicle that I can see with that veer that comes at him. And it's in a very compressed space at that moment. So I don't think it is unreasonable at that moment when that officer shot. That is probably an example of the most direct that I've had of other shootings versus where somebody is driving away, where somebody is going and staging. So for example, we did a shooting review almost 12 years ago. It was the Giles case where the officer actually went, stood in the road, and then wanted to use that as the exigencies for that. And it was over 100 yards away when he started to fire at that. And to me, that was the contrast. This is a bit more dynamic. And this is an officer who is reacting to where this suspect who just had an accident and is going, and he's being directed, and he's getting out and reacting to that. I don't think he was consciously thinking, well, I'm gonna go park and block this out. He goes to the side, he's exiting out as he's responding. And at that moment, I had to say, okay, what is his perception? And the other camera angles actually clearly show me that the van is coming, but prior to him shooting, it actually veers towards him. And at that moment, that perception of that officer for that safety, I think is justified. And it would be unreasonable for me to say that that decision that he made in that context, in that compression of time and that space, that it would be unreasonable beyond a reasonable doubt. And so that is sort of the unique subtlety here in terms of our analysis.
How much weight do you put in between that vantage point as well as what Officer Pojoy told you about fearing that he was going to be hit? I mean, how do you weigh those two together in deciding that this is...
So you actually see, right, so Pojoy's comments are really relevant in the sense that he is contextualizing and understanding the totality of that danger at that moment. And his own perception, right, not Peter's perception, but his own perception that he was fearful that they were going to get hit. And he was fearful that he was going to get hit. And in fact, he says, I don't get out, and in fact, I start to push my body to the right because I feel like he's going to hit us. And at the same time, what we have to appreciate is that while he's seeing that with the van, he also acknowledges that Peters is out, and he's in front of him. So what Pojoy is feeling, then I can certainly infer, even though Peters doesn't give me a statement, I can infer that he is definitely far more closer and in the line of danger that Pojoy is appreciating. And then the question becomes, okay, it's one thing if a van is coming, slows down, and he's driving away. The van actually is coming, and you can actually see it turning towards the officer prior to the officer firing, right? So at least for me at that moment, and that's why it was so important to see that moment of that veer that occurs, because that is what the officer is reacting to. And I don't think that's an unreasonable inference when I can sort of create the full context from other sources. So when I couple it with Pojoy's observation, I see that. And then the other part that's really important, in these kind of scenarios, there is the conscious mind and what I'm reacting to, and also the subconscious reaction. So what is interesting is you can see Peters starting to react because he's now trying to push his body into the vehicle. And he's trying to find as much space as he can, and then you see the veer that occurs, and that's when he fires.
Did you?
Go ahead, please.
Did your investigation show how fast was the 16-year-old driving down the street?
We couldn't really figure that, but it was certainly not a slow crawl that happened. From what Pojoy is saying, he is appreciating that it's coming at an accelerated rate. So Pojoy says that his perception is the vehicle is gone down and is coming and is accelerating as it's coming. And the other thing to keep in mind is what was known to everybody. What is known to Peters and even Pojoy is that this person has run multiple red lights. This person has now flipped a U-turn, going the wrong way. They've called in an accident with the motorcyclist, that he's actually hit a motorcyclist, didn't slow down, and went away. And now he's turning around and coming back at them. So I can't abandon that factual recognition either. And that's why when I said it was important that when both Pojoy and when both Peters are responding, they're not only getting the call, they're immediately on it after the motorcyclist has been hit, and a Samaritan is getting out trying to render aid to that person who's on the ground. So Peters is going by it, he's hearing it, he's witnessing it, Pojoy is seeing it, and that just happened fractionally. So it is not unreasonable to make an inference that this driver is not going to be slowing down, he's not going to be, and he's already hit somebody, and that he may hit them as well.
And your investigation showed that he didn't veer until the officer stepped out of his vehicle, right?
What it showed, yeah, so you can see it. You see Peters step out. He's being directed in real time. He steps out, and he can see that vehicle coming. And then you see, and I could at least appreciably see, the wheels actually turning in his direction. And when you play it, you actually see that jerk towards him, and that space is compressed. And that is when Peter shoots. So it's not like Peter just jumps out and starts firing rounds. He is there, he's jumped out, and when that wheel turns towards him, that's when he fires that round. And he continues now at that moment, because he's now compressed. He felt his life in danger, and he's responding to that. And then, to me, that contextually, that compression is reasonable.
Can you comment on your armchair quarterbacks who say, why didn't the cop just block the road? Is that outside the scope of your
Yeah, I think, and I understand that. And I appreciate you asking, because that's what the average person out there reasonably can say that, right? But I think what is really instructive here is that they are truly in the midst of a dynamic situation. And not just somebody is speeding away, but the context becomes important. He's run multiple red lights, he's flipped a U-turn, he is going the wrong way, and he just took out a motorcyclist on that road. And as they're coming into it, they're asking, where is he? Because they know he's gone down there, and there's two groups of people who were construction workers or utility workers, and they're saying, he just went down right there. So they're reacting in almost simultaneous real time there, you know? And so to say, well, you know, we should have done, they were trying to spike it. They were trying, in fact, earlier, and this is why I think starting the conversation earlier was important, they didn't give him chase. They stopped. He had stolen a vehicle, and they were looking for him. And once they saw, they started to pursue, and Bird says that he parks. You can see Bird's car. They know that this van is coming towards him. He jumps out there to spike it. He sees them, and he stops. So Bird goes on gun trying to tell him to get out of the car. He, at that moment, and there's in the interview, he says, we saw it. He just ignored my commands and flipped a U. And so they were trying to spike it. Now he flips a U. He's on one way. And that's why you can see Bird running, because he takes off and he actually hits a motorcyclist, and Bird is calling that he just hit a motorcyclist. You know, so I think that they didn't have the time to sort of box him in, because it's happening. So while that's Monday morning quarterbacking, contextually, it is so fast. There wasn't time for that.
So I know this took over 2 years to get a decision on this. Would you say this was a relatively clear-cut case in your mind, or was this difficult to arrive at?
The challenge for us is, you know, this is my perennial sort of conversation about it, right? I just have a lot more shootings to review. So we try to queue them up, and we're trying to get them out as quickly as we can. And so our office is responding to, and we're trying to be as thorough as we can be about it, right? And there was a lot of stuff to go through here. And when you put this along with 18 other or 20 other shooting reviews that are there, it just takes us a minute. And we would much rather be thorough than, you know, and we go through in great detail. We go through every piece of evidence that we can, you know. Any other questions?